actually start recording. So thanks, Mistress Arabella, for joining us. Just really to update you, and I'm just finishing with this work. So Gwen and Cope, if you guys want to work together on that, and however you want to make it work, I can either email you all my links and everything I have, and then you can post it. So we're talking about the videos from this meeting we have every month, plus all the MIT trainings I have with a different, to make it publicly available for everybody. And Cope and Gwen are gonna take care of that.
Great. Awesome.
So, and I think, so I don't know, Arabella, if you I wanted to share anything, but you should be able to share if you wanted to share stuff.
No, I don't have any slides or anything.
Oh, okay.
Just me.
That is, you're awesome. Thanks for coming. So,
Drifter punch gets red hot on the airplane.
I'm just going to mute everybody else because that's me. So it's while you're here, and I know your time is valuable, and I appreciate you spending your evening with us again. So if you want to go and get started, that would be awesome.
So great. This is fantastic. So making sure I'm not on mute. Great. I've now stepped up to the Society Marshal position. We have, and I've talked about this in some of our meetings before, but just to recap, some of the big projects that I'm working on is we're updating all the Marshal handbooks across the board to come up with a common template. So when you go to look up rapier versus equestrian versus target archery, it's the same topics in the same order, and it's easy to find the information that you need so you can switch in between things. We're also trying to take some of the common processes that should be common, like accident and incident reporting. There's not actually an SCA standard. Boggles my mind. Anyway, so we're trying to come up with a standard, and there are 7 different Marshal areas, and there's 4 different ways of reporting accidents and instances, equestrian being the most ludicrous at the moment. So trying to come up with something that it doesn't matter which Marshal form you're in, some of these processes, which should be common, you don't have to go learn something completely new or foreign. It should just be ingrained. Like everyone in the SC understands hold. There should just be a handful of things that we do the same across the board. So we're working on getting that in place. We're working also on better laying out very clearly what the chain of command is, Marshal's duties and responsibilities on the field, up and down the chain, to make sure that Marshals feel like they're empowered to take care of issues, and then a clear process afterwards of what to do about that. The equestrian handbook is going to undergo a bit of change because the way it was written was to keep things very obtuse about what we did, but very specific about some of the tools that we use and equipment that we use while doing it. But one of the things we're trying to do for all the Marshal handbooks is start off with, what is the thing that we do? So if somebody read our handbook, the very first section would be a good description of what we do. You know, if it was a sport, what does the activity look like? How would I compete in it? What does it look like? How do I interact with people? What are these Marshals? And then, you know, having common sections on, okay, you want to do the thing. This is how you do the thing. This is the equipment you need to do the thing. If you want to marshal it, now here's how you would marshal it. Or if you want to be an administrator, this is how you administer it. So having those 4 sections for everyone. So equestrian is different, is that we don't actually really describe what we do in the handbook. You know, we have topics, right? We have mounted combat and archery and jousting and games, but we never actually describe really what any of those things are at any point in the handbook. It's very similar to if you look at the target archery handbook. Everyone knows what archery is, but if you go look at the siege handbook, you have the same issues. You read the siege handbook and you have all the engineering specs on if you built it, what they needed to met, but there's not even a picture. You don't understand, how do you use the siege? What does it look like? How would I operate it? None of that's in there, right? So just like for Equestrian is we need to add those things to it. We're trying to get the different roles and responsibilities for the Kingdom or Marshals versus the deputies, things that we take for granted that the deputies should do. We're going to try and just put in the handbooks so it's clearly delineated what the deputies in each of the kingdoms should be doing, and also for the society level. So we're trying to make that all work across all 7 martial forms at the same time. So I have a great team working on it. It's great because we have former marshals for KBMs. We have people from LOCOC, so we have the international, angle on some of these things. We have a liability lawyer on the team, so it's really great trying to wrestle with some of these topics. So that's one of the major things that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is trying to come up with a better laid out structure for experimental programs. And this is where Equestrian has led the way. We have done an amazing job with coming up with new ways to think about how to do historical topics that in the normal SCA, it's could be considered to be slightly higher risk and also lower numbers. And so wood jousting was a great example of that. The Ross-Vectum program and the Mounted to Ground are another good examples of that. So we're taking that structure and making that generalizing a little bit more. And so we've actually adopted some of our approaches, how we do in Equestrian, to cut and thrust grappling in the rapier program. So trying to take the unique ways that we've brought in new historical activities and bring that process and management style to the greater SCA. So another thing that we're doing. There were 3 things, and we're also going through all the rules to make them more DEIA with a DEIA eye, trying to get accessibility discussions into the rule sets, make sure they're more inclusive, make sure they're more equitable, taking out language that assumes that everyone is a 6-foot guy that fights single sword. When you do heavy fighting for authorizations, it should be what you're safe with and what you're comfortable with. Trying to incorporate the different training styles into our processes. So not assuming that everyone learns or authorizes in the same way or method. So trying to make that more inclusive and equitable across the different forms. So those are kind of like the big picture things my office is working on. Any questions about that? I have a couple specific things that we're thinking about for Equestrian. So
now just the last thing you actually mentioned, that was like the discrimination between riding and driving, that I think we talked about last time. I'm not sure if I emailed you that, that drivers don't, I think right now it reads like you need to have a riding authorization, and then driving is a specialty that people who want to drive to be like verbiage differently. I'm not sure right now how it was reading, that people who don't ride but drive, they don't need a riding authorization. Right now it kind of reads like you need to have still a riding authorization before you become a driver or something like it.
Yeah, we should make sure that's not in there, because that definitely wasn't the intent. So
yeah, and I wasn't sure if that was on, if I put it like that on that list I emailed you from last month, but just reminded me about it.
Yep. So yeah, and also if there's things that are different or wrong or don't make sense in the rules, now is the time to bring it up. I have a spreadsheet where I'm logging all of these tiny little issues and things like that. So as we are putting everything in the new format, we can we won't be able to solve every problem, but if we don't know about it, we can't try. So we're going to try to tackle as many of these things as possible.
just one of those really verbiage, and because you've been a part of it, I did not put it on the list I emailed you, but that to make it, or to specify in the rule book when there need to be a marshal on site. So it says right now with equestrian activity, but horses just being present, is that considered activity? Or only when we literally go riding or having an activity like games or something going on? So when does the marshal really need to be present before horses can be unloaded, or before the marshal in charge can leave the place if there's not another marshal on site? Can they still leave horses on site and just leave? Because we had that in September.
Yes, that's actually an incredibly complicated question for not reasons related to equestrian. We realized at one point reading through the Kapora documents is that we're not actually even required to have marshals observing the activities. We just need to actually have a marshal in charge at the event. And it's as vague as that. And so the handbooks really determine to what detail and level that we need marshals and how much they're involved. And I say it's a complicated question because that question is incredibly different depending on whether or not you're in the United States or Australia or Sweden. Those are three completely different answers. So we are wrestling with when do marshals need to be involved, and we are still trying to sort that out for something as normal as heavy weapons. So it's a complicated question. So we're working on it.
So for me, if you would say if a heavy weapon or target archery, in my mind, you can have the weapons there, but you don't touch it. But if I bring a horse, even if I don't ride or so, but maybe I take it out and want to wash it or give it a stretch the legs, and something could happen while I'm just watering my horse or cleaning the stall or let it graze. What happens if no marshal is on site, if your
Right,
equestrians are on site? So with weapons, in my mind, I could leave them in my tent, don't touch until you have a marshal.
Mhm.
With horses or dogs, I'm not sure with dogs because I don't do hound or falconry or anything. You have animals you need to, do we need to have somebody in charge in case something happens? In my mind, yes, just because of the paperwork.
But you have, but yeah, I mean, this is, so there's what Kapora says we need, and then we define it more in the handbooks. And then there's the insurance. So I do need to go back because whenever we have equestrians, there's it's a different insurance rider that's activated for the horses. So I need to know if there's any stipulations on that. But the insurance policies were based off of our current handbooks. So right now our current handbooks state that whenever there's horses, there's an equestrian marshal on site. I don't know how much that figures in with the insurance people versus just having a marshal in charge on site, or the autocrat is on site, is a legal representative for the event on site at the time that anything SCA is on the site. Is that good enough? Right.
Okay.
So those are questions I have to take back to so yeah, those are questions that need to be answered by the insurance side. So it's a really great topic. It also, we're trying to figure out how that meshes with all the other martial activities when we're doing. So
an
trying
additional complication to what you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks ago, I just had an event at a barn. So there are horses that live there, and many of those horses were being used at the event. So when does it count as having horses there if it's literally being held at the site where the horses live?
Right. Well, we have published times for events. So legally, that's when the event is happening. it's during those times. So yeah, like I have practices at my house. So you really only need a marshal there running the practice during the stated hours of the practice, that on the days the practice is happening. Otherwise, the horses just live there. Did that make sense? I don't know if that was in the general area of your question.
It does. It was just something else I wanted to bring up since I did have something very relevant to it quite recently.
Yes.
So I do understand, like if we are going to a public place like a park and I have a location marked off while I'm running the event, outside people just on a trail ride can go and just ride into the riding arena and being part of it. Because they wouldn't be included. So basically we'll just let them know politely, hey, this is something else, please don't use our equipment. Because we had it happen. We built up the joust and some trail riders was pulling into the list. So
we had a similar thing. We used to have practice in a public arena. And so what we settled on, because we couldn't keep them out of the arena, it's a public arena, but we did finally settle on if they were going to do any SC activities. So they were going to try, heads or reeds or the quintain, then they had to sign a waiver, and then they were officially part of our practice. If they were just riding around in a public arena that we happened to be sharing, but they weren't interacting with our equipment or our activities, you're like, then they're just random public people. But if they touched any of our stuff, then yes, they had to sign a waiver. Yeah, we have. Equestrian is challenging. All sorts of unique smell. But it's just like a public park, right? We have practice. We have heavy and rapier fighter practice in the park, and we don't make them sign a waiver unless they come over and they want to try out what we're doing. But if they just stop and talk to us, or they're walking around the park, they have every right to.
awesome.
Great.
Jordan,
things
did
in
you
the
have a
chat.
question? I see yourself unmuting.
No, I was just going to comment that it seems like the reverse is true too. If I was at an event as part of the SCA doing jousting or something like that, and I were to do a trail ride afterward, as soon as you leave that activity, or you return your horse to the barn if they live there or something like that, that's when the SCA activity ends, and whatever else you could be doing in the public areas kind of starts.
Working continuously when we mess around with it here.
Yeah. So I always was like, if that is like that arena and you're leaving, you can do whatever you want to do so long when you get out of the SCA grounds or the event where the SCA is held with your
Right.
rides. So yeah.
You become public at that point. So we
Right.
have that. So they have that at Estrella. They have that at Gulf Wars. Actually, they say if you leave this area, you're on private property. It's not part of the SCA. You're on your own.
Brings up a question. Should we make signs for that? Or then would that be something it's just generally known, or does it need to be posted?
I think it's written into our standard operating procedure for Gulf Wars, and it's usually in the handbook or in the gate book. So it's usually printed somewhere. If there's a clear boundary, it's always a good idea to put that in writing somewhere. So we put it in the gate book or the standard operating procedures in the past for the big wars. I mean, that's usually when that comes up, is that for the big events, you're usually next to something. I don't want to create more paperwork for people. So.
In my mind, it's just because next year I have events where I'm also rented or reserved the trail rides because I want to do that mounted hunt.
Oh yeah.
So I have it off limits for public as much as you can do off limits, but it's officially within our insurance that we have the trails because I still want to do the mounted hunt, which is on targets, not will beings. That's next year. So I couldn't do it this year, but for next year, But then I was like making signs, and for me, it's like do one-time signs, make sure you bring it for next time. And I'm okay to make stuff. So, but it's a good point to think about it. It would be something I wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah, something good to think about.
And you mentioned you had some specific things you wanted to go over with some specific equestrian stuff.
Yes. Hang on. I'm taking notes, so I'm going to
Oh,
make sure I say.
sorry. Yeah, take your time.
So yeah, a couple things that I'm working on. And I talked to Doe yesterday, and I've been, so one is for the Rosfectin program. Right now, there's two parts of the Rosfectin program. One is with the Rawlings swords of the plastic simulators, and then there's a second half of the experimental program, which is with the metal cut and thrust swords. We've had, gosh, many years now of time with experimenting with the Rawlings sword. There's only been a handful of data points on the metal cut and thrust. So what we wanted to do is approve the experimental program in stages. So we're going to work on approving the Rosfectin portion, the Rawlings Rosfectin portion, and then just leaving the metal swords cut and thrust version as experimental.
Nice.
So we think we're going to go back over all the data and look at the reports, but we believe we have enough data to make a sound decision on at least half of the program right now. So instead of waiting for it
That's awesome.
to get updated on the other half. And we're doing a similar thing in Rapier. They have an experimental program that's been going on for 3.5 years. And it's like, all right, you've tried 3 things. 2 of them we're perfectly happy with. The third one we still have questions about. Great, let's approve those 2. And then just focus on risk mitigation on that third element, but not hold up the whole program if we get to a good spot. So that's something that we're doing, I think, a little bit differently when we're looking at experimental programs. It's not all or nothing. It's like, and that's the whole point of experimental programs. You try it out, figure out what works, what's not working, and then figure out where you want to go next. You don't want it to drag on forever.
Which is awesome for Ethelmark, because Ethelmark doesn't do experimental activities. It's just like one of the things we are not allowed to do in our kingdom, at least not for the equestrians. It's specifically for the equestrians. I don't know about the other ones, but it says we are not part of experimental decisions or things we can do. So now we can include that in our activities.
Well, part of it is because most people, like the seneschals and usually KMs, really aren't familiar with horses as much. And so when we talk about what we're doing, it can sound scary to someone who's never seen it or never done it. We were actually just up in Artemisia, and they wanted to be part of the Rosfectin experimental program, but they were getting a lot of pushback from the kingdom officers. So we went up there and did a demo. And once they saw it and we talked to them about it, they were like, oh, okay, that wasn't what was in their head from the description that they had read. So that was very helpful. But yeah, hopefully we're working on that. I'm going to get with Apollonia and give her that. She's going to guinea pig the new template for me and see whether or not we can put the Rosfectin rules in the new template, and we'll go from there. So it'll be a good experiment on trying to get that updated.
That's awesome.
The other bit of news, I need to do a couple tweaks to the write-up, but for the ground mounted program, we've got that cleared to come back online. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, like I said, I need to make some tweaks to the document and then send that up to the SCA president, but he's on board with bringing that experimental program back online. So look for that happening in the next month or so.
Awesome.
And again, it was one of those, just a communication thing and getting a better understanding of what we're doing and who was involved. And these are not the SCA. These are not the horses of SCA 30 years ago, right? We have evolved just like everything else in the SCA. We have better training techniques. We have better equipment. We understand better what we're doing. And so the horses that we have involved in the SCA today are much further ahead than we were 20, 30 years ago. So SCA Equestrian has changed a lot. It's really evolved and grown and matured and really just done amazing things in the last 15, 20 years. So getting that recognized. So was very happy with that conversation.
I'm surprised nobody else has questions.
I didn't want to interrupt. I do have a question. Will the updated handbook, are you seeking appendices for diagrams or photos or links to videos to help better describe what it is we're doing?
Absolutely. So, yes, to all of that. Across the board, there's a shocking lack of diagrams in a lot of the handbooks. And then having videos is incredibly helpful. So the other thing we're planning to do with the handbook rewrites is that we plan to make them all online. If you go to Locox Rules, they use a wiki editor, and it's really fantastic for getting updates out and having those links. And then also doing configuration management and tracking changes over time. That's all built in. But it also has the fantastic option that if you want a PDF version, there's a great big button, click print to PDF, and here's your handbook, right? In normal handbook PDF mode. But other than that, it'll be online. So our ability to be able to link to videos and diagrams, we want the diagrams definitely in the handbook, but being online will have a much greater opportunity to link to videos. So for armored combat, they're already talking and trying to organize creating handbooks on how to do armor inspection and things like that. So videos would be great, especially since we want the handbook to be user-friendly. So if someone goes, what is this thing called Burhas, or reads, right? Oh, here's a video, right? This is what it is. Because if I want to go to a 4-H competition, right, I can read the handbook and it's pretty explicit. I have a probably 80% idea of what I'm walking into off a 4-H handbook. But then I can just go to YouTube and Google 4-H and the name of the class, right? And here's 15 videos of people competing in that class. So we need to have the same sort of accessibility to what we do to new people coming into all of our Marshal forms.
I agree. So my follow-up question is, are you going to do a call out for those requests for those types of videos and a timeline?
So the timeline is I want everything wrapped up and done in the next 8 months, which also includes, so the next, we should have the outline done within the next month. And then the next 2 or 3 months after that is rewriting the handbooks into the new format. And then we're going to have it out for public comment. And then we have to do the public comment and reviews, and we're going to have a lot of interaction. So about 8 months is when we'll take it to the bot for the final signature. So yes, we're going to need those diagrams and videos of pictures probably starting in about 1 to 2 months, probably 2 months. So I'm meeting with all my deputies this Friday. And I talked to Doe yesterday. I said, get a team together, because it's like, we have to write the whole handbook. I know how you despise doing that sort of thing. There are lots of really good people in the equestrian community that would love to do this sort of thing. Put a team together. And she went, oh, okay. So not to panic, poor Doe. It's like, no, you don't have to do all this work by yourself. There's amazing people out there in the group. I'm sure would be happy to help. So I assume Doe will put a call out at some point, or hunt her down and volunteer, knowing this is coming down the line. I'm sure she would not be amiss.
I hate the handbook. She can reach out to me, please.
So yeah, it's I think the new format will be really good. It's an interesting challenge. I mean, when we talk about it at a very high level, it's easy. And when we go down to like the next level in the outline, still not too hard. And then it gets really difficult because we are talking 7 different martial forms, 20 different kingdoms. There's literally 140 different handbooks out there. And so we need to make sure that we have an outline and an approach that allows for the different cultures of the different kingdoms to still have that flavor. It's fascinating when you read the handbooks from the different kingdoms, you can get a picture in your head of what the culture of that kingdom is like. They're very distinct. And we don't want to lose that. It's one of the things that makes the SCA really amazing and fascinating, is that we are 20 different kingdoms with 20 different cultures, and it's reflected in our rules. So how do I make a rule book that's more easily accessible, a little bit more standardized, but still allows everyone to have their own flavor? So like I said, the first 2 layers are not that hard. It's then when we get into the nitty gritty, and across 7 very different martial forms, right? I mean, heavy and rapier, they're at least within ballpark of each other. Equestrian is, and then you have target archery and thrown weapons. And while they're very different, they still have a lot of similarities. Siege isn't a class by its own, and equestrian is all of that plus. So,
And we actually talked about, but I think it was in the writing before the Prince Zoom, that within the SCA, the equestrian events we put up, we get riders from every discipline. If it's trail riders, Western, dressage, working equitation, there's so many different approaches from where we come from different equestrians backgrounds, or what we like, or how we ride. And there at the end, we're all meeting on equestrian events with our different horses, different discipline, different tags, or training approaches or philosophies. So it's always really interesting. I'm sorry, I was reading Cope's message while I was talking.
Me too.
Yes. Oh, so yeah, Mid-Realm is looking at posting videos. Yes. So there's lots of really great videos out there. So yeah, and with the online version, we'll be able to maintain links a lot easier and better than having it just in the PDF. So that is our hope.
I have another question, Arabella. If we're trying to all come together in a synchronized way with our handbook, and yet kingdoms will want to make deeper restrictions, instead of having separate kingdom handbooks, is it possible to have one society handbook in all disciplines and just have a side note or a footnote that says, however, in the Middle Kingdom, we are restricting to XYZ?
So there are at least two very distinct ways to handle the variances of the kingdoms. And we have been looking at them both based on what is easier for people, but then also what is easier on the technology side. I'm slightly at this point leaning towards having addendums because, and we kept going back and forth between, because it's online and it's a wiki, you have the option that I could just replace that paragraph with that kingdom's paragraph, rather than having, here's a society rule, but we're doing it differently here, right? Those are kind of the 2 approaches. Is you could have a completely customized rule book just for your kingdom, or you could have the society rule book plus an addendum. The majority of the kingdoms usually just have an addendum. Some of the kingdoms just add the lines in the handbook as they go. Because we're putting this online, we have to make a decision on how to do it and then make that technically easy for kingdoms to be able to do those updates. So we haven't quite settled that question, I guess, is the roundup. I'm slightly leaning towards the favor of addendums because it makes it easier for the majority of the kingdoms and our international partners. But yeah, we haven't quite settled that out on the technology yet. We're still figuring out the best way to do that.
Because I would add, the hardest part is when I go to an event out of my kingdom and I don't know what your minute addendums are to try to abide by those.
Right. So we were hoping we can make this very obvious on the online portion. The other nice thing, and this works for the United States, and there's a time delay for our international partners, but if we have an update, the society rules and all the kingdom handbooks are linked back to the same wiki thing, they would update immediately. So we're hoping to get out of this issue where, you know, we do an update to the rules and sometime in the next 1 to 10 years, your kingdom will get around to updating your handbook. And about, I think it's close to 35, 40% of the kingdoms just say we follow the society rules. So the society rules, because it'll be online, will be a little bit more up to date faster. The other thing that we're doing is, for those of you who have read the handbook, you know this, it says we leave it up to the kingdom to come up with an authorization process. And then nobody ever does. I'm looking at you, equestrian community, with less than half of you have a written process down for your authorization process. So one of the things we plan to do is for those things where we say, hey, the kingdom, you can create, you know, the types of marshals you want or the authorization process that you want, we're going to have a default. So that way, if someone says we're using the equestrian rules, there'll actually be a default process and not just a line that says the kingdom shall establish this process. And then they never do. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
What we're trying to do?
Yes, I like that.
And then I
Well,
would
we're
like,
actually
I think
starting
it
our
was
training.
last year in one of the Zoom meetings, because I know we created it and we talked about this in here. We had like how to authorize for riding, to make a checklist and stuff like this. If you're interested, I can, if you don't have it, I can mail you what we created within the Zoom room, if that helps you out on anything. But we only did for general riding and carriage. We didn't do any of the specialty activities.
Right. And we have that lovely 3-page document that we wrote many years ago ad nauseum, how to do an authorization. So yeah, things like that is something that we can incorporate into the handbooks. And that's what we're hoping to, is having some defaults in there.
Okay. I can definitely send you what we have from in here, or what I have, what we created within those Zoom rooms, because I think it was last year we spent a couple meetings on talking about it. And just like it was more left as this is a suggestion in case you feel you want to have like a checklist on how to do it, not like it's mandatory to use it kind of feel. But I know I created some stuff, we talked about it, so I just send it to you after the meeting if I don't forget.
Okay. And then, yeah, keep your eye out for when Doe starts organizing a team, make sure she gets all those.
I can send it to both of you.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm hoping to do to keep in, we don't have to put everything in the handbook. I'm also creating what I'm calling the Marshal's Corner. So we're working on creating a web page off the SCA org website where I can put Marshal things that I can actually update and not have to go through the web minister. So one of those things is I want to have a folder of just resources, right? For like, hey, you want a really lovely detailed checklist or authorization process. Here's a couple examples. I also want to use the webpage to bring updates of where we are on the handbook rewrites, any recent rule changes that we're doing. It was kind of fun. So I did my first quarter report to the BOD a few weeks ago, and there's a publishable summary. And so my publishable summary is like 3 pages long because there's really great information. And it's like, I want everyone to see it, and not everyone is watching the BOD meeting or, you know, and so it's going to be there. But then what I hope to do in the future with the website page that we're creating, I can actually put the Marshal reports, the publishable section, up on the website so people can go, oh, what's the latest happening in the Marshal's office. And also bring online maybe some things that we're working on, like Mounted to Ground. We're working on bringing that back. You know, the Ross-Vecton program, we're working on making that mainstream. You know, stay tuned. Just so it's not just word of mouth. There's a place that you could actually go and see what's going on in the Marshal's office. We're also plan to list all the experimental programs on the Marshal's page. So that way, if one kingdom is like, hey, I have this really cool idea, I want to do this thing. Oh, wait, you know, Atlantia is already doing it. Why don't I call them and just join their program? So there's no one, I mean, there's word of mouth, but there's over a dozen experimental programs going on. I'm still finding out about some. So it would be great to have them all listed in one spot with a point of contact. So that way people, if they want to get involved in an experimental program, they know what's going on in the society and they know who to call.
And I really like that, even maybe for that Marshall things, you know, what to do when you run into problems and you don't know where to go.
Oh, there's a whole huge section of that in the handbook. So we actually have a section in the handbook called "What if I have a problem?" Right. So, right, the first section is I want to do the thing, and then there's a section on how do I do the thing, and one of the key sections in there is what to do when there's a problem. And so that will be kind of universal between all the Marshall aspects. But yes, there'll be a lovely, clear right there in the handbook in a huge section what to do when there's a problem. From not just the Marshal's point of view, right, but from the participant's point of view, right? I'm a writer and I have this problem. What do I do, right? So we're writing that into the handbooks. So the participants know what to do. And then you have, okay, I'm a Marshal and there's a problem. What should I as a Marshal do? So we're trying to get that codified and pretty similar between all the different Marshal forms. The Equestrian might have some unique ones.
Just a thought, because for me, being highly dyslexic and have reading comprehension disabilities and stuff like that, while it is online, can we do this like little help button, you know, you put in what are you needing before. So for me personally, it's difficult to run through 20 pages to find the answers to what I am looking for, especially if I'm time pressured and emotionally not on my best state right now to find an answer. Could that be like interactive? I could basically Google it, like looking in the site that document where to find it if I'm a writer and I don't know what to do right now, or Marshall, I don't know what to do.
Okay, so that's the beauty of electronic documents is your control find button where you can just put in a keyword search and locate if you wanted mounted combat or miners or anything of that nature.
You're telling me that exists already, I just don't know how to use the electronics.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I think there's still some opportunity to optimize for Google search, like what Cope was saying with the videos for training and how to do like an authorization. If you search for SCA equestrian authorization, there's no real quick guide that pops up in Google search. So I think there is some opportunity to optimize it so it shows up for Google search, which is how at least I search for a lot of things is SCA, and then you type in what you're trying to do and does it show up or not? And a lot of times it doesn't. And I know Facebook is not great at showing up in Google search, but certain kind of like YouTube is pretty good at showing up on Google search and other types of I guess options show up more frequently than others.
I will bring that back to the IT team. I don't know how they've been handling it because, like I said, Local's already wikified over half their manuals. I don't know how they deal with the search button. I know for me, it was incredibly useful. I was out at Great Western War and we had a question about gorget construction requirements for heavies. And one of the marshals was like, wait, I've got all the handbooks printed right here. And they were like flipping through it frantically. And I pulled out my phone and Googled Locock, Wiki, Armored Combat, FOOM equipment. neck. Here
Right.
you go.
Perfect.
So by having the same format and having at the top line, right, on that clickable, the things that we would normally ask about. So there might be more nuanced questions which may not show up that you'll have to actually search the document, but especially for equipment or, you know, role play on how and what type of activities we do, we want that to be a very easy clickable. It's easy to find, right, within 1 or 2 clicks. Lowcock actually did a really great job of making sure that for each section, it's, you know, a reasonable number of bullet points. It's not pages of stuff. It's there's a optimal amount of information you can have on a page when you're looking at it on the web. So they really did a good job of balancing the outline breakdown versus how much they put on each page. So we're using that for inspiration and trying to keep that same flavor of not having, you know, 3 pages of information on 1 click. It should be, you know, 5 or 10 bullet points.
Okay, awesome.
Oh yeah, the previous versions. So, well, yeah, well, it's not a doc, right? It's a wiki. So if you click on it, you wouldn't you wouldn't pull up a document.
Oh yeah,
It'd be a
I
wiki.
wasn't talking. Yeah, I wasn't talking so much about the documents. I was talking about Google's and Docs in general because Atlantia has been using Docs. That I'm like, that definitely pulled up the wrong version before.
We have all done that. Yeah. So, but yeah, we're hoping the wiki will help. It should help some of these issues. So we have high hopes. At least we'll have a common template. I've got the team that actually wikified all of Wilcox's rules. They're on my rules writing committee and they are building it as we speak. So it's actually was in process for the last last 2 or 3 years, but we're pushing along a lot faster now. So
I appreciate all of the stuff you do, and to have that mind frame to do it, have the energy to getting it done. I think it's absolutely awesome. I appreciate you dedicating your time and energy for that. It sounds really amazing.
well, I have an amazing group of people who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So it's definitely a huge team effort.
I get that, but still, thanks. Thanks for getting it started and rolling and maintaining it, because sometimes that can be exhausting as well.
Yeah. The other reason why I'm trying to get everything done in 8 months is like a lot of this requires a lot of deep thought and it's really complicated and things are all intertwined and overlap and are entangled. So if we do it in a shorter time, it's easier to keep everything fresh in our minds as we're wrestling with some of these larger questions. So, but yeah, so I'm probably in about 1 month, if I'm optimistic, probably 2 months. There's actually a huge thing I need to get done before the January bod. So that's kind of soaking up my time right now. So something in about 2 months, we'll probably see the rollout and have people start trying to mesh the rules into the new template, new format. And it's going to be iterative. You know, we're going to come up with our best guess and then people are going to try and put the rules in there and we'll find out exactly where we screwed up and we'll have to fix it. So we're not going to get it all done in one. Hopefully we can get it done in a couple of iterations.
Okay. And I will make sure I'll send you what I have, because I think you remember last year we started, or after Pensic last year, we started to put like documents together to consolidate rules of the different kingdoms and a resource list. And it just got discontinued because the people in charge had life situations and kids and stuff like that. So, and then I stopped asking and trying to push it forward. But it is in a great way. There's a lot of resources that is out in the universe of the internet. I can send you what I have if that makes it easier for you to maybe doing your stuff.
That'll be helpful. It'll give me good stuff to look at to see how we might be able to incorporate it into the handbook. And if not, I can work with Doe to create, an equestrian folder on the Marshals page where people can have access to those resources.
Yeah. Because
we used to have a Marshals page just for equestrian where we would put a lot of this stuff, and then they redid the whole SCA webpage and it disappeared. So, but we're going to put something back up for all the Marshal forms.
In Cope and I during pandemic, we started to teach about like how to build equipment, what to use for solid ground, or you can put like stakes in the ground and all the different stuff. So there's also information for all the equipment building, what works, what to look out for.
That would be good stuff in the resource folder. That's not stuff we necessarily need in the handbook, because the handbook is really just, it's a combination of helping people get started in it, but it is mostly about the rules that we put in place to make sure that we meet a minimum safety threshold.
I get that. I just want to mention that we have some of that already. If you would, or links for that, I can supply some of that stuff. Maybe it's less work for you. If I can help, let me know.
Okay. What I might do, actually, you give me a really good idea. Once I get the Marshal's Corner webpage up, what I'll do is I'll have all my deputies send out announcements and start gathering up the information they want on there. So, yeah, I've got 7 deputies. I'm going to I put them to work.
And consolidate, yeah. That's basically how it got started for us last year. I think it was really to consolidate the information, because I know I spent hours on the internet searching on best way to build a quintain, or best way, or what are my regulations for a quintain lens versus a ring lens. Can I take my ring lens to Middle Kingdom or East Kingdom, or are they universal in length and tip? Is there differentiation? And sometimes I forget, and then I show up and the boss like, oh, we don't accept metal tips in my kingdom.
Really? Like kingdoms are still doing that? Okay. Yeah.
That was a long time ago. I'm not sure right now, but it happened, and I was like, and we always share equipment, so not a big deal, but it would be. That's basically where back then our idea came from, to consolidate all that information. If there is differences between kingdoms of what you need for regulations.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah, we're still trying to wrestle with how to bring up specific kingdom stuff easily in the handbook.
Well, I know whenever I go to another kingdom, I'm going to travel to Lily's or what have you, I always pull up their Marshal handbook and go over it and make sure I know the conventions for, like, I don't know, death from behind, or, Callantyr, I think, still has this rule about limited angles for your pole arm or something stupid. But, you got to know what they have. Yeah, that's on me as the visiting person to read their handbook.
Yep. I'm also encouraging, and will be requiring, all the deputies to review all the kingdoms' handbooks to make sure, so that kingdoms can have more restrictive rules, but they need to be compliant with the SCA minimum. And typically what happens is that the handbooks are only looked at when the kingdom is stood up, and they're never really reviewed again at a society level. We did an equestrian. We did on a periodic basis go and grab all the handbooks and all the different kingdom rules and reviewed all of them to make sure that things were compliant and they weren't going too astray. But not all the different Marshal forms have been doing that. So we're going to be, we'll be doing that too. I spent an entire weekend. I only made it through 15 of the 20 kingdoms, but that took 7 hours. And I was only reading Armored Combat, Rapier, and Kingdom Law, because I was trying to answer a question I had for myself on something in the rules. And yeah, that it takes anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes per kingdom to review 1 or 2 handbooks. And there's 120 of them. So we're
To have
working on
it. So yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating though, because as I was reading through them, I'm like, wow, I really got a flavor of kingdom culture by reading the handbooks. It's really amazing how much that comes out. And just the different kingdom websites too. So that's still a challenge. Every kingdom has a website that's set up differently, and they don't all have the same pull down menus, and they don't categorize things in the same way. So part of that 45 minutes plus or minus 15-minute search was trying to figure out where the rules were listed on their website.
Then to find the specific area you're looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, because in the mid-realm, you would think they would be in the mid-realm library, but they're not.
I know. What's with that? Because I went, oh, the mid-realm, it'll just be in the library. Because I know about the mid-realm library. It's expensive and amazing. And I'm like, why isn't it here?
No, I've been getting my MIT and Marshal in the different disciplines, and it's been an experience just learning how uncoordinated things are.
So yeah, it's fascinating. But yeah, when you sit down and start plowing through all of these handbooks and all the different websites, it's just really amazing how incredibly diverse we are. Yet when we come together with big wars and events, it's amazing how smoothly it runs, considering how different we all are. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
We're all trying to live the dream, and that makes it work.
Yes. But yeah, but like I said, think about it. If there are things in the rule book that you're like, why does it say this? And I've already found several examples, and I wrote that version where there was 2 completely different answers for the same question, and I'm like, it's completely my fault, because that was my edit of the handbook, and I remember editing that section, and it was not consistent with the rest of the handbook. So as you find these things, let me know. Like I said, I have a big spreadsheet that I'm just documenting all of these things as we go. So as we are going through the rewrites and updating, we can see if we can take out some of those conflicting rules that showed up in the handbooks.
And that's maybe something.
Equestrian
Go ahead, Cope.
The equestrian mounted combat weapons. That's my biggest complaint, aside from the overall organization, is that I have been a heavy fighter for 3 decades. I pick up the equestrian handbook. I read through it. I have no idea how to make a legal equestrian sword. No idea. And Sir Sato shows up with these things, and I'm like, these aren't legal. And then, oh, Sir Sato made them. They're legal. Okay, this is what we're using. but I don't know where this came out of, those words. So that's my hugest complaint. If I could fix something in the handbook, equestrian handbook.
All right, please fix per.
And if you need help proofreading, organizing, I proofread for a living. I can proofread fast.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm not gonna be running that, hopefully. I got 7 so if you actually look at how many different marshal deputies there are up to 14 different marshal deputy disciplines, right? So you have all the 7 type, and then you've some split out rapier and cut and thrust. You've got youth rapier, you've got armored combat youth. Yeah. So So my guess is I'm going to get in and wade in a little bit on the equestrian side because I'm familiar with that. I'm also using equestrian to, so as we are putting together the Marshal handbook template, for every line, for every section that I put in there, I bring in an example from armored combat, from rapier, from target archery, and equestrian. So I can make sure I have a good cross section of the different elements. Siege is a whole nother end, like get siege in there too. So yeah, and it's also getting, as the SE has been growing, it's not as cut and dried anymore, right? So we have siege, right? So in the past, siege has been under armored combat because you use the siege weapons in armored combat. But now we're rolling it out in this next quarter. There's going to be target siege. So like target archery, but with siege engines and with, siege engine ammo. I can't believe we haven't done this before now. So it's like, all right, it's good that we already have a deputy separate. We already have a separate siege deputy, but now that deputy is going to be living in two worlds, right? Target siege and heavy siege. Just like we have combat archery and target archery are actually completely separate offices because they're so big and they're slightly different, but there's also a lot of overlap. So we're also trying to figure out where is there overlap that people can help each other. There was a fantastic discussion on the target archery Facebook page. One of the target archery people reached out and asked, what are my roles and responsibilities? What can I not do for equestrian archery? I'm a target archery marshal. And so it engendered a really good conversation because a target archery marshal should be able to inspect equipment for equestrian. We've set up the lanes so each marshal format is only responsible for their own thing, but there's a lot of crossover between the two, between several. So we're looking at how are there ways where we can make that overlap clear and make their scope of how they can and cannot help, more obvious, because it'd be great because having a target archery marshal come over and inspect equipment, great, right? And while they are helpful with understanding whether or not we have a safe range, the way we shoot is different enough that our range safety is different from what they would consider a safe range. So those nuances come into play, which is why everything equestrian is under equestrian, and vice versa.
Sorry. We had that actually after our champs in Ethelmark that a target archery marshal was bringing that up, and I think he got asked to marshal equestrian archery, and he was just like, I don't even know where to start. And he basically used what he's seen at our champs, being a target archer marshal, what we did at equestrian, and had tons of questions. And I was like, well, for mounted archery, you need to have an equestrian marshal as present. You can't run it as a target archery. That was one of the first things. But there was, I don't know if that's the same gentleman, but it started with a target archery for that, because it started in September after our champs. At least on the Ethelmark, he wasn't really quiet on where I could see discussions, but or it stopped the discussion. So I don't know if it went on to a different SEA page that I'm not part of.
Yeah, I think they reached out to me, and then they went and used that to update a blog. It might have been North America. I knew it was one of the A kingdoms. So, but yeah, it was a really good discussion. And it's like, I don't want to discourage the target archers from coming out and helping out the equestrian and vice versa. But yeah, some clarity on what their roles are and responsibilities would be helpful to everyone where there's that crossover.
And I think that one of the things, as I understood, that really triggered is because we had target archery, and we also had Turslin with her chariot there, and Tersland was willing to allow target archers to be in her chariot for archery for that. So that, and I think we had 3 or 4 there came more over, but Tersland has minis, and there were already so many for that day for her minis to run through that course a couple times. So she said, I'm done, or my minis are done, which is totally fine. But I think a lot of the target archers really got, oh, this is kind of cool, and it's a lot more challenging than target archery. That's kind of what I thought maybe triggered some of that, hey, we're target archers, can we do mounted archery or equestrian with a chariot archery for that? Just to give you a little bit feedback, if that is where I seen it starting on it.
So good. And it also came up with, can a target archery marshal inspect the equipment for combat archery? So it's not, so combat archery, target archery, and equestrian all share some common elements, but not the exact same common elements. So it's because ammunition is different in combat archery than target archery. So
yeah, the bows are completely different. Well,
yeah,
the bows I use are completely different.
So yeah, it's some good conversations. So and it's similar to conversations we're having like with thrown weapons. You know, we're getting interesting new weapons in that we're like, where does it fall? And a lot of the conversation revolves around, well, what are the range safety concerns? And that's helping us try to figure out where things might fit in. So slings came up. Slings are a very interesting thing. So unlike thrown weapons and target archery, we're always shooting in one direction, right? If you have thrown weapons and you have target archery, everything's going downrange. But with a sling, you now have a weapon that's moving 3-dimensionally. So what are the range implications? And then atlatls, while it looks like a thrown weapon, has the range of target archery. So these are all fun conversations we're all having. So,
yeah, I didn't even think about it. So something just to bring it up, and I did not double check, I need to confess, with mundane mounted archery versus some of the equestrian or SEA, is there actually any regulation that we can shoot backwards in the SEA? Do you know, just by any chance, that we can? Mundane, a lot of times you go all the way back and shoot backwards.
That's what we started with. When we first started mounted archery in the SEA, the target was actually, you had the lane and then you had the target here. So you would shoot forward at the target, you would shoot at another target off to the side, and then you'd shoot back at that target next to the lane. Okay. So you shoot 3 arrows, forward, sideways, and back. Yeah, we've always done that in SEA equestrian.
So that was something
unique archery range requirements, which is different from target archery. So I was having that conversation. It was a target archery, and he's like, I drew up these great diagrams, and he's like, I drew up one for equestrian. I went, that won't work for us because we shoot forward and we shoot backwards.
Okay.
We need 180 degrees. We can't not 45.
Because we had somebody who did that, and I was not prepared for that, to make sure where everybody was waiting, she turned past the target, and on the other side where everybody was waiting, we were like doing a big hold thing. So because it was like, you can't do that, especially then. Yeah. So, and I was like, I just thought about this learning experience of how far you're cleared when you're cantering down the lane for that.
Yeah. When we started, when we were teaching mounted archery classes at Gulf Wars, so that's actually the first place I learned mounted archery, was you shoot forward, sideways, and back. And then even the big targets, they'll have like the trifold. So they'll have a target that there's a main one, and then you have 2 wings, and it's meant to shoot. It's not right next to the lane, it's further out, but you're still shooting forward, sideways, and then you're shooting going away. That's very common.
Where I was, we never really shot backwards within the SCA, but also could be because it was primarily me starting this here, and I haven't been exposed to a lot of other ones except the mundane mounted archery. So I was not, again, mental note, to make sure nobody's in the turning backwards area. And to really just specify that, to make sure you have all of that range for nobody being around, no equipment standing and stuff.
So this is where a diagram would be fantastic. Like I said, that one target archery Marshal, it was great. He came up with some great diagrams. I said, you need to alter the equestrian one because we do this. He was like, oh, okay. So we had a good conversation about that. But yeah, a diagram would be so helpful. Not that it has to be exactly that, but if you're setting up a range for the first time, this is here's an example and here's why it's set up that way. So
Yeah.
again, not just to help the marshals, but to help participants who are like, I want to go do this thing. What does mounted archery look like? We all know what target archery looks like, but we don't know what mounted archery looks like unless you've seen videos of it.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference if it's a single target with single arrow that's always perpendicular to the target. You should kind of be able to stay within that 30 to 45 degree angle versus, three arrows at the same target essentially with a lot of different angles, is where the challenge comes in.
Yep.
And we had set up 2 different targets, multiple targets in that one lane of running down, not just one, and you could go. So, but again, learning experiment. And it was somebody who shot the first time that was not in my area that came to somebody. She's a mundane mounted archer, and then basically happened because that's what she was used to for that.
Yep. Especially with mounted archery, modern and mundanely is becoming so popular. So I'm going to have a lot more people with that background coming in.
Okay. Well, it is 8:30. If anybody still has questions or concerns, or Arabella, if you would like to add some additional things, but otherwise, thanks for coming and sharing.
Well, thanks everyone. I've got some great notes and some new things now I have to think about.
So before you showed up, we did talk about making a little holiday session next month.
Sounds like there was one more question. Someone was trying to.
Yes. I'm trying to figure out how to ask.
You good?
Okay. I was wondering, because I am in the northern part of Meridies, is there going to be any kind of marshalate reciprocation? Because we're trying to get equestrians back on track here, but if I want to get somebody authorized, I have to go find somebody that's a long way away or go out of kingdom to get them authorized.
So one thing that we've discussed about, like I said, we want to put accessibility sections in each of the Marshal handbooks. And one of that has come up is how to help remote areas. In the era of Zoom and video, there's no reason why we can't use those to help with authorizations. So that is something we're trying to add into the accessibility thing. So you could, and we've done it before. I've authorized people in South Africa. So we got on the phone, we talked for a little bit, they shot some video. I'm like, all right, they know how to ride. We can look at someone who's riding and know that they're pretty, they're responsible and they're going to be safe. So, doing it in person is always better, but for remote areas, phone, Zoom, video, those are options. Does that help?
Yeah, it's I guess part of it is our Meridian handbook says that authorizations can only happen at a official practice or event.
No, that's actually all SCA. That's not just
So
equestrian.
if it's not an official practice for an event and there is no marshal present because that's all you have, are you saying there's just going to be an exception for that for those of us who live in BF nowhere?
That's a fantastic question. I'm highlighting that in bold and red.
Wouldn't a KEO, even if he's not or she's not a marshal, and be able to supervise an event?
Well, in order to be an event, you'd have to activate the insurance, and
You need to be a marshal for that. No, the
Right.
KEO
and you have to have a marshal. You have to have a marshal there, and so that's actually a really good. We're going to go look into this. The way the handbooks are written now, yes, you're stuck. Let me go figure out if there's something we can do to solve this. And
Well,
maybe
right now,
go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Right now, I'm hauling people up to Illinois from East Tennessee to go to Mid-Realm's official practice at Rhinmar and Laura Graymare's place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then you could go and get approved for out of kingdom authorizations. If they both KEOs would approve of it, they could at least get approved to be authorized. There would not be marshals yet, but
But
at
it's
least
still
you would have authorized riders.
it's still a huge, you have to
Yeah.
travel and blah blah blah. So let me take that back, because that's something that we imposed on ourselves in the handbook. That's not a Kapora thing. So we can change the handbooks, right? So Kapora is the governing documents, and the governing document says that our safety and our processes are in our handbooks. So I need to check to make sure that's just a marshalate rule and it's not in the seneschal's handbook. I'll go track it down. Though that is an amazingly good question. It's not a straightforward answer because I'm not sure how far reaching and how far widespread in the Kapora documents and the other handbooks that rule reaches. So I need to go track that down.
Well, if they're not at an event or an official practice, they don't need to be authorized. That's like when I have folks come down to Morning View Stables and we're just playing. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, if she needs to get people authorized at an event or an official practice, you can get permission for out of kingdom marshals to assist you. I've done that in the past, and you're not that far from me.
But she cannot run an event with no marshals present in her location to grow her area.
Right. So we need to get marshals in.
Yes, and I would like to become a marshal. But it's going to be very difficult. I used to be a marshal a long time ago, way back, and I took a break. And then now I'm back into the SCA and I kind of have to start all over, I guess. But
in the mid-realm, but I have a fast track process. I don't know about Meridies. I haven't looked at your handbook recently.
They don't have a fast track. They don't have it written down. So there are only less than 30% of the kingdoms have a process or even a checklist or anything written down on how you become a marshal or how you become authorized in equestrian.
Okay. In the mid-realm, we have a fast track. So, I know the KEM. He knows I can ride. He knows I can read a rule book. He trusts me because he's known me for 20 years. Boom. I take a test. I'm a marshal.
Right. So yeah, the mid-realm is the land of process. So that's actually a fun thing about, I did my senior paper in sociology on different kingdoms. So the mid-realm is a kingdom held together by process. Because it's so big and it's so vast that having documented and processes for people to follow is how the kingdom really helps hold its identity together. And it's fascinating, but yeah, I love the mid-realm and the processes. Awesome. You guys have them.
So Coco, contact your KEM and Equestrian Earl Marshal and ask them if there's a fast track or how to address this and how we can get you guys enough marshals to start running events. And like I said, I'm
Right,
not.
because I have 7 people with 6 horses that are ready to start practicing and getting ready to think about coming to events next year. Yeah.
Oh, I need to go check. I need to go check the rules, because while we have rules about you can authorize at an event, that's for authorizing for participating in the activity. Authorizing marshals follows a different process. So yeah, that's a good question, which it's come up not just in equestrian, it's come up in armored combat and rapier, and just there are kingdoms that are very thinly populated, right? And they only have a very small number of people in certain areas. So how can we rewriting the handbook so they're more understandable for people to actually read it? So if you parachuted into Timbuktu and all you had was a handbook, you could at least vaguely get, there should be enough tools to get you started.
So just brainstorming, we do have all the theoretical part online, or we're starting it on the martial training in January. Again, there's 3 different parts of how to run an event and the requirements and of duties of marshals, equestrian marshals. If UKL would be okay with the online version, and then maybe you could do some of the hands-on either via Zoom or in a different kingdom, we could maybe get you as a marshal. But that would be, would need to travel to an event outside of your kingdom, or via internet, that a marshal, if nobody can be there, well, you can't have an official event for that. So that wouldn't work. You couldn't do a Zoom mock authorization at not an official event, because you still need a marshal.
So Coco, I assume you get to some events here and there?
Oh yes, I went to Mounted War Games. I went to two or three of Laura and Brent's official practices. I go to Gulf Wars every year.
Yeah.
I went to I forget the name of it. Just the it was up in Mid Rome with
Crystal
the
Champagne?
Yep. No, that's not it. It was later than that. It was this one that was just at the big fancy wedding place.
You also
Anyway,
Griffin's Fest in Calontier.
Yeah.
Yep. It was
Right.
Griffin's Fest. That was the last one I was at.
I don't know how soon I'll have an answer to you, but I definitely have the question written down on really how best support people who want to be marshals or participants in scarcely populated areas with few opportunities to make some of these things happen. Especially for the marshal side, it varies so widely. So yeah, that's a good question.
One option I was thinking of, if possible, is to see if some kingdoms would allow reciprocation, so that I know not everybody carries handguns, but it's what I know. Some states allow other states licenses for handgun carry to work in their state. So if kingdoms would say, like Meridier said, yeah, okay, so Mid-Realm and Atlantia have similar enough rules to ours. We're going to allow their marshals to act as marshals on our soil.
So I'm down here in the southern border of Calontier, in Grimfells, and so I'm literally on the border of Onstiora and Glen Aubin, and to a certain extent we do that. We have some who are kind of authorized in Glen Aubin and Calontier, and back when Onstiora, some of the people around closer to us were active, the same there. So, I mean, not necessarily reciprocating, but authorized in both kingdoms.
Yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, it's actually a very interesting question on reciprocation in general, because for interkingdom wars, right, we don't care where you got your marshalate from. You're a marshal, get out on the field and help marshal, right? And we just grab any old marshal from any kingdom whenever we do interkingdom wars. And there's different rules in different kingdoms about if I move into this kingdom, right, you carry over your authorizations and there's a grace period until it goes over. But every kingdom does vary a little bit differently on how they handle marshals from different kingdoms. There's no set one way to do that in the SCA. So how they use marshals in their kingdom has been left up to the kingdoms. And I don't think many kingdoms have actually thought about that or have written it down, or if it's just up to the deputy or KEM at the time.
So how about if we would offer martial training in inter-kingdom events, like Coco mentioned, she comes to Golf Wars, to make classes, to go through the theory, to do that part of it. There's so many activities. There could be mock authorizations and everything else done during those, or do that multiple day event, and then to get that into the different kingdoms so people could get their martial authorization at an inter-kingdom event and taking that home.
So that, I know in Thread Weapons they do that. People come to Penzic and they all get authorized and then they go home. And in Equestrian, we've done that in the past because we have a rule in the Equestrian handbook that basically says if your KEOs and your KEMs agree, you can have one kingdom authorize you and they'll accept it in the other. But there's not a global standard way of how that happens. It's kind of been, Equestrian is one of the few handbooks that actually explicitly has a rule written. There's a paragraph that says this is how, here's everyone that needs to be involved in order for you to do cross-kingdom approvals. Because it's like, but I like your example. It's like, well, I think of authorizations like driver's licenses, right? It's like, well, I have a driver's license from Colorado and I can drive through other states. If I move to another state, I have so many months before I have to renew my license in that state. There's not a reciprocal, it's reciprocal as long as you're visiting, but it's not reciprocal for permanent. And that's the difference between the two, right? We're asking, can you have a reciprocal all the time? I think, right?
Well, can you have a reciprocal for a marshal?
Like
can a marshal have the ability to marshal outside of their kingdom?
You can marshal outside of your kingdom. It's up to the kingdom that you're in on whether or not they recognize you're out of state.
But there's nowhere to find out if they recognize it as part of the problem. It's one of those, can I do this? I don't know. I can't find a rule on it.
That's when you call your SEO.
Nope, she's right. I mean, it's a really good point. There's not any, I can't easily pull up the rule book and go, aha, here's a rule that says if I'm visiting, can I marshal in another kingdom?
Yeah, in the past, we've just asked the KEM or the Equestrian KEM if we can do this, and I've never been turned down.
Right. But what we're trying to do is make it so it's easier for people to find these answers rather than I have to go ask, and it depends who I asked on whether or not what answer I get. Because you may get the answer of sure in your part of the world. I can name 3 other instances in the last year where the answer has been no. So, and then again, it's that borderline of how people run their marshalate is left up to the kingdoms. At the same time, is if we can answer some of these questions and put something in place to help answer those questions and make it easier for people, that would, so it's an incredibly complicated question, but yes, thank you. I have it in my notes in giant red. That is definitely a topic we need to tackle, and I'm pretty sure that's just going to bring hours of entertainment to my rules committee.
Sorry.
If you want to listen to people talk about rules for 10 hours straight without drawing a breath, yeah, that, and it's be the same topic. we get into it. Every nuance, every variation.
Well, I personally love SOPs, so I want to put an SOP together so that it's not it depends on who you asked, you know?
Yeah.
But Coco
Right.
also would, I don't know if you talked already to your KEO, I would basically really start communicating with them and really trying to find out what their thoughts are. So when you do get some answers from Arabella, maybe then you know already what you could do to move forward for next year.
Yeah. I mean, for you getting your Marshal, that, and with all the events that you go to, that's something you could work out right now under the current rule set. It's a little cumbersome, but it's there.
I share some tributes there, that I am also dyslexic and have a hard time reading the rules and understanding them when written. So looking them up is very awkward for me. I usually just go to Laura and say, Laura, help me understand what I need to do next. Because we've been friends for 30 years. So. But I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I think that we're on a good track. I just hope that I can help keep my part of the kingdom on track and get us back together so we can have events that actually have horses and people show up.
I'm trying to plug in my computer real quick.
There we go. Out of Kingdom authorizations, page 10. And I have to say, I mean, I know how to interpret the rule. It is not the most clearly written. I I get that. Where? Okay, the page numbers and the index have nothing to do with each other. Okay, out of kingdom authorization. So yeah, valid authorization cards are accepted outside the issuing kingdom. So if you travel and you have an authorization card, you're considered authorized. So if you're an authorized marshal, you should be able to go to another kingdom and just marshal. Kingdoms may define additional requirements before renewing an authorization for someone who's moved into that kingdom. So yeah, once you move there, they can say, no, you have to be authorized or not. Sometimes they grandfather you in. And then here it is. Yeah, it's kind of specialized because the rule basically says individuals residing in a kingdom that has an EQ equestrian program, but doesn't have that special activity can authorize in that activity in another kingdom, provided the KEO and the KEM approve. But marshals exist in your kingdom, so it's limiting. So yeah, the way the rule is written, it was written to allow us to, like, if we didn't do archery in my kingdom, I could go to Gulf Wars and get authorized in archery and then come back to my kingdom. It was not written to address your question of, hey, how can I use other kingdoms to help me get authorized with less travel? No, that's a great question. I will throw it to committee, and it's going to go in 15,000 directions before we solve it, but hopefully we will solve it.
And if you can go and take care maybe of the marshalling during Gulf Wars or so, I'm willing to help with whatever I can. So if that might work out like that.
I appreciate that offer, and I will try to get down to Equestrian as much as I can at Gulf Wars. But I'm also a merchant at Gulf Wars.
Yeah.
So
And I understand that. I was just like Gold Force, where normally Doe is there as well. She's our SEO. So with her presence plus other people present for such a big interkingdom and people present that might work for getting it, even if that is an exception, to get somebody from your kingdom as a marshal so you can continue growing your program where you are. That's kind of my thought, was like at least to get you started with that. And I just was like, I'm not trying to override the rules from Arabella also, but just like at least to help out, because I understand how frustrating this can be to work against some rules and regulations, or to work with and not against it.
But no, that's exactly the information I need, right? Where something that makes sense that we need to be able to do, the rules prohibit it or limit things in such a way that we can't flex. So that is excellent feedback. Thank you so much.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I'm going to have to go because I am an hour overdue. So thank you all. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks. And it is 9 o'clock, so I know a lot of other people zoomed off already as well. Thanks, Arabella, for doing this and being open and available for all of us and for everybody's input.
Yes, it's fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
And then just as a reminder, next month, we're going to do a little holiday fun meeting. If you have
that was
time.
fun last year. The quiz was hilarious.
Yeah, right. So, and Mishi, I don't know if you were already on Zoom. Mishi, they are gonna organize it, and they volunteered to go and run it.
Nice.
So I'm just hosting and help with whatever is needed.
Great.
Okay. Otherwise, have an awesome evening, and I'll try to remember to email everything I have in case you can use it.
Okay. Thank you.
See ya.
Good night.
Night, guys.